Honourable Member Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I begin discussion today on Bill C-57, which is the updated Canada-Ukraine trade agreement, we've had some conversation already this morning on the subject of the differences between trade agreements and investor protection agreements. I'd like to approach that topic again in talking about the updated Canada-Ukraine trade agreement, and also put a frame around this. Number of Liberal MPs have said this agreement makes an effort to name climate change and tackle climate change in trade agreements. I wish that were so. We have a long way to go if we're going to actually confront the ways in which the World Trade Organization and its creation have actually undermined the climate agreements and multilateral environmental agreements in general. So with that frame, Madam Speaker, I'll move very quickly through some of the larger issues here, because it is unusual for us to have any opportunity in this place to address the trade and investor protection agreements and how they impact climate, and they do. Let's start, Madam Speaker, by looking at the last effective multilateral environmental agreement the world has ever seen. And that was the most effective. It was negotiated in 1987 in Montreal. It is, of course, the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer. I was honored to participate in those negotiations as senior policy advisor to the Federal Minister of Environment in the Mulroney government back in those days. And I have to say, if we look at the success of the Montreal Protocol, it's astonishing. We actually have not only arrested the destruction of the ozone layer through various ozone depleting substances, but we've also expanded that agreement with the Kigali Amendment, so it's also being an effective treaty that has helped reduce greenhouse gases. One of the key reasons that the Montreal Protocol was as successful as it was that the agreement to protect the ozone layer had enforcement mechanisms. It had penalties for countries that chose to ignore their commitments to protect the ozone layer. In fact, those treaty sanctions were so effective, they never had to be used because countries abided by their commitments in the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer. The effective sanctions were trade sanctions. It's very hard to imagine any kind of international treaty that binds nation states and has an effective punishment system that would be other than trade agreements. It's the most logical place in which we can inflict some degree of penalty on non-compliance. So the way the Montreal Protocol worked was to say that if any country ignored its commitments to reduce its use of and to stop the production of chlorofluorocarbons and other ozone-depleting substances, that country would be subject to trade sanctions from any other country that was a party to the Montreal Protocol. Now, since every country on Earth was a party to the Montreal Protocol, that's why it was a very effective mechanism. 10 years later, in 1997, in Kyoto, Japan, when we negotiated the Kyoto Protocol, tragically, Canada changed our position 180 degrees. And instead of being a country that championed making these agreements effective by including trade sanctions, our Minister of Environment headed to Kyoto saying that if trade sanctions were included in the Kyoto Protocol for climate action, Canada would not sign. Now, what happened? In that 10-year window was the creation of the World Trade Organization. The end of the Uruguay round of negotiations resulted in a more established center for the trade work globally. Now, all of this emanated from the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And Article 20 of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade had, since just after the Second World War, when it was negotiated, set aside and protected from trade sanction those actions that were considered to be part of natural resource conservation and so on. So Article 20, and it appears as Roman numerals XX of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, set aside essentially environmental protections without using that language. It certainly didn't reference climate, but we had the window there to protect what we did as nations for legitimate, not trade motivated, not protectionist animus, but for legitimate pursuit of environmental protections. We could not be sanctioned by trade deals. That all changed with the creation of the World Trade Organization. It created a committee called the Committee on Trade and the Environment. And instead of asking the useful question, do we have trade agreements that get in the way of environmental protection? They asked a different question. Do we have environmental agreements that get in the way of trade? And they spotted, well, look, there's this Montreal Protocol. We don't like that. We don't like this Basel Convention, which allows trade sanctions, or the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES. So we already had a number of agreements that said we are allowed to take measures to protect the environment, and we are in those agreements saying trade can't get in the way. Well, the trade Hydra raised its many ugly heads and said, no, we don't want you to do that. And there was never any decision, by the way, Madam Speaker. There was no ruling. It was just a matter that in every national capital all around the world, the powerful trade ministers at every cabinet table turned to their less powerful environment ministers and said, you can't use these tools anymore. As a result, not a single climate agreement that Canada has ever signed has had any sanctions at all. The only sanction in the Paris Agreement is essentially the annual global stock taking of what language that's coming up at COP28. The global stock take is essentially a sanction based on global shaming and embarrassment, because there is no sanction there at all. We really need to deal with this. And although the window here with the Canada-Ukraine trade agreement is pretty well a closed window because the negotiations are done, let us take this moment to say this is wrong. We need to, and certainly President Zelensky of Ukraine has been one of the most outspoken champions, that the war that Putin launched illegally against Ukraine must not get in the way of climate action. President Zelensky knows it, champions it. This is a good time to say, let's make sure that all of the climate agreements are protected from trade limitations. This is a good time to dust off some of the decisions that have been wrongly assumed to say that you can't pursue climate agreements without violating trade deals. For instance, the tuna dolphin case, shrimp turtle case, both of those cases at the WTO appellate level left out in very clear language. We're not saying, they said, that you can never protect the environment under the WTO, but you can't do it one-on-one. You can't say the U.S. makes its own rules and then tells Mexico what to do. But they did say, in the context of a multilateral agreement that's negotiated, trade has to back off and respect those commitments. That's the case with the Paris Agreement. Every country on earth is bound by it. It's a perfect opportunity for our government to step up and start saying you can't use trade agreements to limit action to protect climate, as has been done. Sanctions against India for moving to renewable energy and so on. And we recently had another investor protection agreement decision that hampers climate action. Just quickly to go back in the 2 minutes remaining to say that trade deals are different from investor protection agreements, but investor protection agreements, such as in Bill C-57, in the existing Canada-Ukraine trade deal, there is an investor protection agreement. These are very corrosive of democracy, in that they say a foreign corporation has a right to sue a government if it doesn't like something that government does that reduces their expectation of profits. Our government got rid of it in negotiating for the new CUSMA with the U.S. So what was Chapter 11 of NAFTA is now gone. We should be moving quickly to remove investor protection agreements that undermine our democracy and our environmental protections and our labor protections, and getting rid of investor protection agreements, or at least ensuring that they don't give foreign corporations more rights than domestic corporations, would be very welcome indeed. So Bill C-57 as an improvement and modernization of Bill C-50 of the Canada-Ukraine trade agreements is fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't do those things that many Liberal MPs have. I think they haven't been misleading the House. They absolutely believe it to be true that the Canada-Ukraine agreement, as reflected in C-57, modernizes and includes more protections of the environment. It doesn't really, because unless we get at the basic conflict that trade agreements and the WTO have set themselves up to be superior to multilateral agreements, multilateral environmental agreements like the Paris Agreement, we're always at risk of trade deals and trade decisions from the bodies like the World Trade Organization undermining and sabotaging global climate efforts.
Yeah. Resuming questions and comments, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I do believe that within C-57, there is references to our environment. There is references to unions and worker labor standards, if I can put it that way. And when I look at previous agreements, I do believe that we are moving the ball forward. That the member makes reference to the World Trade Organization and so forth. And I think at the end of the day, this particular agreement does achieve a significant amount in the right direction with respect to the environment. My question to the member is can she just provide her thoughts in terms of the Green Party's position with respect to this specific deal? Does she anticipate voting in favor of it?
Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I would just agree with the Parliamentary Secretary. There is language about climate. There is language about labor rights, there's language about Indigenous rights. The difficulty here is that you can put in all the language you like in pretty words, but if the effect of the supremacy of trade deals and the World Trade Organization remains untouched, then anything we put in pretty words is undercut by the effective, hard impact. Like it's like having a set of really sharp scissors that cut through that paper. You don't really make the progress that you think you're making to just say we care about climate. But if there's going to be an investor protection agreement that says, I don't like the decision you just made, government of international agreements that make sure that we start to changing technologies and moving towards renewable and so on, the ability of a foreign corporation to sue over that undercuts the pretty words. So that would be the point. And I will say to the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, I'm in all honesty.
Allow for other questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciated the member's speech on the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. She spent a lot of time talking about investor protections and suggested that foreign investment protection promotion agreements are corrosive to democracy, corrosive to how we represent Canada's sovereignty at home and abroad. However, I would ask her, there has been an investor protection agreement in place with Ukraine since 1994. 30 years. Can she point out one or two cases that have taken place under those provisions that have resulted in Canada's sovereignty being impaired?
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
In the generic category of investor protection agreements that have damaged Canada's sovereignty, I would point more to what used to be called NAFTA, where we had decisions taken by our parliament that were reversed because of complaints by U.S.-based corporations. Canada has lost out over and over again in those agreements. And in the case of the one with FIPA with China, since all of those decisions are secret, we don't know how often it's been used to challenge. I think the Honourable Member for Abbotsford, I think he knows the answer is I can't think of a time that the Canada-Ukraine agreement has been used in ways that preferenced Ukrainian corporations over the government of Canada. But the reality of investor protection agreements is in the context with a bigger power, the Canadian companies have lost out in U.S. challenges under arbitration, as Canadian governments have lost out when U.S. corporations challenge us. It's a consistent thing through investor protection agreements that the larger economic power, whether it's the investor that's the larger economic power or the nation state, whichever's the larger economic power.
I'm sorry, I do have to allow for one more question. The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And along those same lines, I wonder if the member also wants to talk about not just instances of particular investment protection agreements, but also the cumulative effect of constantly building these types of provisions in, whether they appear as independent agreements or as ISDS provisions and trade agreements, the kind of chilling effect that that has on government decision-making long before anything is brought to a trade tribunal.
Sir, from the member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
As ever, the member for Elmwood Transcona is brilliant and absolutely right. There is a chilling effect. So when the government of Canada acts to ban a toxic substance, as it did to ban a gasoline additive called MMT, and then we're found to be very bad, naughty, we get our hands slapped. By the way, because the Chrétien government decided to settle this before it got to a decision on MMT, it has the effect that the people at Environment Canada who thought, well, we better ban this because it's a neurotoxin and it's already affecting the health of Canadians, they get sanctioned. And the money that was paid out to Ethel Corporation in that case came out of the core A-based budget of Environment Canada. There's a real chilling effect every single time that Canada, the sovereign state, takes a measure for the environment or human health and gets told that they were bad to do it because a foreign corporation didn't like it. It's quite...
I'm sorry, there's just so much time, unfortunately, and I know that it's a very passionate issue and very important one. The honourable member, resuming